groups. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to start my presentation. Let's go to the first slide. Good afternoon. Thanks for giving me the floor. About 1 month ago, we witnessed a major terrorist attack in Bratislava. This led to several victims from the local LGBT community. Unfortunately, there was not only this attack, but during the investigation it was found that the perpetrator also wanted to attack some Jewish buildings. And he selected the gay bar in Bratislava as a second target instead of the Jewish buildings. And this is an alarming fact because the number of terrorist attacks rose in the territory of former Czechoslovakia. It shows two things. First, a terrorist attack like this is possible in our territory, and the perpetrator doesn't have to be only someone who is an immigrant with immigrant history. No, to the contrary, the perpetrator was a radicalized individual, a sole perpetrator who radicalized on the internet, and then he committed the crime. In light of these facts, I have been asked to speak at this conference about the scope of anti-Semitism in the Czech Republic. The Czech Republic has a reputation of a country where anti-Semitism is not a major issue. Generally speaking, this remains to be true. However, when you go to watch a soccer game or you travel by train, you are confronted with certain expressions that you can, for example, see on the slide. It shows that anti-Semitism can be very visible in our country. Just a technical remark. I'm receiving a great echo. Could the technicians please do something about it? Okay, thank you, and I'll try to move on. So you are then confronted with some signs of anti-Semitism, although you may not be a member of the Jewish community at all. Anti-Semitism is a complex research problem, and its solution and prevention requires cooperation of experts across the entire spectrum of areas, for example, criminology, psychology, anthropology, political extremism, social science, and so on. The problem of this phenomenon is that it is fluid, so it's very hard to touch it, and it transforms very quickly. It changes more fast than the terms of our fields. So any prevention strategy then requires a combination of a large number of data and approaches and cooperation of a team of a wide spectrum of experts. When you try to investigate the scope or extent of anti-Semitism in a certain country, you should not only rely on one survey, on one figure. You should always try to combine multiple approaches and multiple sources to get a complex picture. On this slide, for example, you can see an overview of several older surveys. They show that based on the wording of the question, based on the concept of the survey, it seems that roughly 13 to 34% of Czech population have a certain issue when it comes to living next to the Jewish community. Next slide, please. One of the surveys was from 2014. It looked at the extent to which Czechs believe certain anti-Semitic claims or statements, and the situation in the Czech Republic was the best from the entire region. However, when we looked at the social distance, meaning whether you would be willing to accept a Jew as a relative in your family, then the situation in the Czech Republic was much worse than, for example, in Poland, in the Catholic Poland, or in Hungary. According to a Eurobarometer report from 2019, 20% of people perceived anti-Semitism as either a very important problem or fairly, and another 8% thought it was a very important problem, and 20% thought that it was fairly a problem. A long-term series of surveys carried out by the Institute for the Opinion Polls, which looks into the emotions of Czechs vis-à-vis various minorities, showed that the Czechs who were asked to use the school marks, they would give themselves the mark 1-. Slovaks would have the mark or the grade 2. Jews would have 3. And this would be the same for the other nations from Western Europe, for example, the Spanish, Germans, and so on. And you can see that there is almost no fluctuation of this mood in the Czech population. And it doesn't change even after the escalation of violence in Middle East. However, although this behavior seems not to change a lot, so the grade 3 shows indifference. According to the data of the Ministry of the Interior, when it comes to crimes, to hate crimes, we can see a cycle of rising and decreasing pattern. So you can see a rise and then a decrease again of crimes which are motivated by a hatred towards the Jews. In these crimes, we can see a visible cause of certain issues such as, or triggers, for example, the rise of violence in the Middle East, or the first Russian invasion to Ukraine in 2014, or the migration crisis in 2015, and so on. Currently, we seem to be at the peak of the yet another increasing phase. I expect that next year we could be at the peak, but then the Russian invasion came, which is a major trigger of these crimes, so it's hard to predict the future developments. If these triggers are eliminated, we may hope that there is a decrease again and that we could see another cycle of a drop in the sinus curve. But unfortunately, Putin said no. Generally speaking, crimes with extremist subtext in the Czech Republic were decreasing, which is good news. If we look at the data from the Federation of the Jewish Communities, which are published in their annual reports on anti-Semitic manifestations, I divided these data into verbal and non-verbal manifestations. The first chart shows the physical manifestations, the physical attacks. Luckily enough, there were just isolated cases of these attacks, just a few cases of vandalism or harassment that we have every year. There was no major growth in these attacks. The last major increase was in 2014 and 2015. We are going to see the data from 2022 very soon. The Federation of Jewish Communities, however, saw a major increase in the verbal anti-Semitic manifestations, especially online in the social media. And this is an increase that we have been seeing in recent years, and we cannot explain it only by a mistake in data collection or a change in the method of data collection or in a change of software. No, it seems that there is a clear trend of an increasing verbal anti-Semitic manifestation. As for the ideological background of the incidents, quite a lot of them cannot be categorized. There is no clear ideology background. And if you remember the first picture that I had in my presentation, this is a picture where you cannot tell who presented this picture, whether he was a communist, whether he was a Muslim. We have no context for this. So in this type of statistics, it would be part of the category other, unclear. Important producers or source of anti-Semitic incidents are far right and the disinformation platforms. This is a term used by the Federation of the Jewish Communities. It is a complex group of movements, websites, and activists who combine alternative esoteric spiritualism, the belief in conspirational theories, and with a pro-Kremlin opinions. I myself do a survey of the anti-Semitic manifestations on the internet, and apart from the social media, I can see that in the Czech Republic there are about 120 active anti-Semitist websites. These can be tiny blogs up to large portals with a 500,000 visitor rate a month. As for the ideological background, I think that the role of the far right is decreasing, and the role of the disinformation platform is growing. I call it conspiracism. It's the combination of the alternative, esoteric and conspirational theories and the strong pro-Kremlin movement. The websites operate all over the Czech Republic. It is not only an issue of any remote location. Basically, we can say that it goes in line with the population. And we can see some geographic specificities. For example, if you know the Czech Republic and the geography of the Czech Republic, you may notice that there are almost no websites in the area of the Sudeten, where neo-Nazis seem to be much more active than the conspiracist movement. Neo-Nazis have a tendency to conceal their own identity. And it means that their websites are not clearly visible in this map. It means that if you have some empty zones in the country, these are the zones where the neo-Nazi websites are active. This may be people from Most or Teplice, but we don't know who specifically is the owner of the website, so we can't put them on the map. And since I'm running out of time, let me just give you some qualitative characteristics of the Czech anti-Semitism. The essential qualitative characteristics of Czech anti-Semitism is the role of the pro-Kremlin disinformation platform. We can say that up to 80% or 85% of anti-Semitism websites in the Czech Republic are pro-Russian. Another 10% are not decided, and only about 5% of them, these are isolated islands, are pro-Ukrainian. There are certain groups of neo-Nazis who have some personal contacts with the same sector in Ukraine, but these are rather isolated. Another characteristic of Czech anti-Semitism is that it's anti-Semitism without Jews, regardless of how the Czech Jews are, how this Jewish community is. These people seem to attack people who have nothing in common with the community and maybe just thought to be Jews. Another special characteristic is that, unfortunately, even high-ranking politicians or representatives of the cultural sector were involved in the incidents. I don't want to say specific names, but there were some cases of senators or political consultants of the former president and so on. The good news is that society has some immune reaction. So whenever there is an incident, you get a response from wider public. And this response may be even stronger than the incident itself. And this is good news, and it provides certain hope. Another specific aspect of Czech anti-Semitism is latency. It means that the phenomenon is latent and is not visible for quite a long time until there is again a trigger and when a target is found, for example, a Jewish cemetery. For this reason, it's hard to research into this phenomenon. One of the signs or effects of this latency is that certain representatives of the Jewish community don't want to speak about anti-Semitism because they think that they might bring this phenomenon by speaking about it. This is something that I experienced several times. They think that if they speak about a certain social phenomenon, they might actually support this phenomenon in society. And these people think that they should not speak about the phenomenon because it may bring some negative connotations. And it shows that this is not right because the people are feeling a certain pressure. And to conclude, I would like to mention the impact of the government's attempt to attack the disinformation platform by cancelling or shutting certain disinformation websites. This is something that is probably going to be resolved in court because there is no legal basis for this step, and it will probably lead to case law. But it's important for the research of anti-Semitism. This is because the pro-Kremlin movement is the main entity that commits anti-Semitism. So what we saw was that the media scene of the so-called alternative media was cleared. The platform is still here, but it's now situated a little bit deeper. We got rid of some of the websites, but most of those that we eliminated were the websites that were immediately replaced by other web projects. But we did a certain cleansing, and in one of the charts you could see a huge drop of these websites. But overall, the websites were able to transform, and they continue with their activities again. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to any questions you might have. Thank you.